Welcome to the first podcast of the Gaea Project. We here are the founders of the Gaea Project, which at first began as the Gaia Model United Nations and grew into something much larger, something that we all wish grew farther away from just the boundaries of politics to more open forums and a much larger point of view of all the youth and basically everyone that can be included with us.
Mhm.
Without further ado, let's begin with the first podcast of the Gaia Project. And today we have here the founders, as I said, Aman Devnani, Dhairya Bende, Yash Pandit Rao, and me, the host for today, Arjun Singh. And the topic we decided to discuss today is aggressive nationalism. Now, let's see. We in the past, let's pick any topic.
Mhm.
Let's say freedom fighters or freedom fighters
All
were
right.
quite different. Any kind of nationalism
Mhm.
where a certain bias comes up when talking about the government, that in a way can be counted as aggressive nationalism. Now, we may so as to assume some
Mhm.
things such as the sudden
Yep.
outspurt of aggressive nationalism in India, right? So I would just like my
Mhm.
co-founders to talk a bit about their views on aggressive nationalism, just to give your opinion and introduction a bit. Go on.
All right. So what I feel is nationalism is sort of a feeling, and any feeling which is forced in any kind of way is always aggressive, and that never leads to any good, right? So that's my basic explanation of what can be aggressive nationalism. And if you want to explain to a 5-year-old, you can use that term. All right, let's sort of move on to the next co-founder. What about Dhairya? What do you feel? What is aggressive nationalism according to you?
About aggressive nationalism, it feels as if a government is imposing something on the people of the country. But
Mhm.
nationalism is a feeling that aspires from a person individually due to his love for the country and for the betterment of his country. So basically, what aggressive nationalism does is basically it it imposes it on the citizens of the country on the name of patriotic duty.
Yep.
While it may not be, but it may only be for the favor of the majoritarian government that have
Mhm.
established such terms. So that's my
All right.
views on aggressive nationalism.
Right.
All right.
And
Let's
Aman,
move on to
go
Aman.
ahead. Yeah.
I agree with Yash in the state that like nationalism is something that the people themselves feel. It's a value that cannot be forced upon someone, and whenever it's forced, obviously it becomes aggressive nationalism. Aggressive nationalism is said to be done in the interest of the country, but may not be be doing something in the benefit of the
Mhm.
country. So aggressive nationalism is a rather emotional type of thing than a logical thing, and that
Exactly.
is my take on
Right, right, right.
uh,
So, Dhairya talked about,
Mhm.
they talked about patriotism being forced upon people as such, and that feeling of patriotism being forced upon people can be counted as aggressive nationalism. Now, I would just like to open the forum here.
All right.
Guys, in recent times, what I've seen is the terms patriotism and nationalism have become quite synonymous, right? But according to my personal belief, my personal opinion, well, patriotism is basically one's own love for their country, whereas nationalism, as such, is
Mhm.
a feeling of faithfulness that my country will is the best country and it will be growing, right? So
All
while
right.
I agree that in some areas the meanings of nationalism and patriotism overlap, but I
Mhm.
still do not understand how aggressive and patriotism, let's face it, patriotism is the perfect, let's say, boundary of nationalism. What happens is
All right.
when nationalism as such is posed in such a way that everyone in a nation
Mhm.
cannot even express their opinions upon the government, right? So basically
All
what
right.
is happening is that the government and the country are becoming synonymous with each other. So when someone says,
Mhm.
I don't like what the government is doing, it becomes synonymous with I don't like where the country is going, right? So
Yep.
yeah, could anyone just talk about more about this? Because I have this certain view that
Yes.
Mhm.
certain words have their own meanings
Yeah.
and they are overlapping due to the modernization of their sense, right? So
All right.
yeah, go ahead, go
I
ahead.
kind of I kind of disagree. If not completely, it's sort of like a parallel path to say. All right. So the word nationalism and patriotism are moral man-made concepts which can be bended anytime. You can have any vague meaning of it, all right? Because the feeling is always vague, right? You can't describe happiness. You can't describe let's say sadness. You can't describe depression because it's a scientific it's a scientific term because there's shit going on in your brain, right? But the feeling of patriotism and the feeling of nationalism it's all moral. People can just bend it in any way and they can sort of use that in arguments. And I actually agree with the point that Arun mentioned that the words country and government are bit getting synonymous because I believe that's because of the entire propaganda scene that's happening. Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah,
much my
agreed.
view. All right,
Yes.
moving on to Daria.
Yeah. So basically, what has happened is that people and leaders use the word patriotism for if they do not agree with the government, so they will be considered as anti-nationals and they are not patriotic in nature. Basically, that is what happening. So they are making
Mm-hmm.
them they are making these two words synonymous while they are not. Basically, not being a patriot doesn't make you an anti-national. Criticizing the government is a free thing to do. So, of course, I agree with what Aryan said, but this is my point of view from
Dere,
it.
I thought you said not being a patriot does not make you. Well, I would just like to
It actually
clarify
does,
that.
right?
Yeah, it actually does. So let's say, Dere, you said, well, let's say you are a part of a country, and obviously,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what your views on the government are, you definitely love your country, right? And I mean, there are people
Yes,
who,
undivided love to
yeah,
the country is
yeah,
patriotism.
exactly. And you see, what I'm saying is that patriotism needs to have
Mm-hmm.
patriotism and nationalism need to have their own boundaries. So as to nationalism does not become a synonymous term with patriotism, and it basically means that if you do not like what the government is doing, you are an anti-nationalist, right? So,
What I
but
feel is the broken bridge here is a context because Daria was probably talking about the patriotism that the aggressive nationalists per se are talking about. I believe that was what Daria was saying. It was kind of
okay,
misinterpreted.
okay, yeah. So
Was it Daria?
Yeah, that's right.
right,
All right.
yeah. But my point still is that we see that a lot of people, and you talked about propaganda. Well, let's say this. There are many people who don't
Mm-hmm.
even know about the propaganda, right? And they know because the people believe in that propaganda, as you say, right? So people believe that if a person
Mm-hmm.
says that the government's one initiative, or let's say a step, is incorrect or inadequate, so people immediately label them as anti-nationalist and non-patriotic people. Whereas I believe that people
Mm-hmm.
deserve to have their own opinions as long as it doesn't, uh, cause kind of
Hurt national interest.
yeah, it doesn't hurt national interest exactly. So right, and Aman, you've been
Mm-hmm.
silent for so long. I mean, I know you have some very strong opinions about this. So yeah, please go on.
I agree with the Aryan Singh, and as you said, that does not make something anti-nationalistic. So, as in, if you do not agree with the government, so that does not make you an anti-national. That's true. And due to the excessive propaganda, I believe that people do not know the boundary line between patriotism and nationalism because there's so much of propaganda, so
Mm-hmm.
much of fake news that people have to constantly use their brains to think that whether this thing is right or not. So I
Exactly.
believe yeah, so that's why there's a like mixing between
Mm-hmm.
patriotism and nationalism has been happening.
Right.
Even the funny part about propaganda, as you brought it up, was people don't know what is propaganda because they're already in it. you can't know what is propaganda, because let's
Right,
say if we take
exactly.
the fallacy of the common man fallacy, right? So it's basically just a mindset of not being skeptical. So if I hope all of you know
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the common man fallacy, right? So if a person is just chilling in suit and boot, on the other hand, a person is wearing normal clothes like what the general public wear, people will try to get attracted to the person who is wearing the general clothes, because they think they are like they're similar, they have something common. Or it's sort of like the relevance and recency bias as well, that when this kicks in, this can be done purposely. And if this is done purposely, it's obviously wrong, because that's misuse of power and misuse of how
right,
you present
right.
yourself. All
Well,
right.
see, there's another thing that we are so
Mm-hmm.
liberally using this term propaganda. But see, the thing is, propaganda to a certain extent wasn't spread by anyone, right? We, as a nation, have been, or any nation has this idea that a government is always doing the correct things, right?
Yes.
Because that's why a majoritarian government is formed, right? A government which has more seats in the Lok Sabha forms the government, right? So that's the whole point,
Mm-hmm.
that the people believe in that political party that will then form the government and then will make decisions that are in favor of them, right? So what the problem with the propaganda is, people are interpreting it in the wrong way, right? So what I believe is that
Mm-hmm.
if people start understanding what the message actually means, right? For
Mm-hmm.
example, I mean, when you look at something in the news, it's obviously a clear statement. But sometimes when you see a news and it says like, "Is the person ABC a murderer, or let's say a financial bagoda, let's say, right? Bagoda means a
All right.
person who has to lead the country, right? And add a question mark. That
Mm-hmm.
leaves it open to interpretation for people, right? And when some things are open for interpretation, they will definitely have repercussions that cause, very violent or very extreme acts or even extreme ideologies, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you know, let's take the easiest example that we can take here, right? We can take the example of
Mm-hmm.
Kashmir. Now, hear me out. I know, too controversial, but see, the the abolishment of 370, right? When explaining it, obviously all not everyone was able to watch all of the explanation of that bill, right, to abolish it. Not everyone was able to watch it, analyze it. They only took what was given to them by the higher uppers, or by the media that wanted to give a certain image of it. So I wouldn't name any media house, but certain media houses depicted this in a good way, while certain media houses talked about this in the bad way, right? So that is the whole point, that some things, when open to interpretation, make extreme ideologies. And because of these extreme ideologies, not just propaganda, we see the growth of aggressive nationalism, right? I mean, wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
somebody have a comment on this?
Yeah, I do. The thing
I'll
with news is, the thing with any news houses, they want the news to be very, attractive. They want it to be small. They want it to attract it. And the funny thing about every human is they like to look at extreme things, right? Everybody doesn't like moderate stuff. They'll be just bored if they hear about moderate stuff, right? That's the reason why people choose to see all these like extreme ideologies, because also because of that the media also get the TRP, and that's why this ideology gets
Yeah.
running. And the median, the point where the discussion should be there, like with sort of a temperate lookout, it doesn't ever happen. It's always like it's right or that's wrong, and this is exactly the propaganda of black and white fallacy, if you go deep into it. Yeah, Aman, you were saying something, you may.
Yeah, I wanted to say that it's a humble request to the audience that when you like listen to the news houses, so please think logically and do not be swayed in the torrent of the emotions they try to portray. So they
Mhm.
actually try to portray news that might not even affect you or may not be interesting you in such a way that you think that it's wrong, or it maybe it's a bit too correct. So please think logically and not rather
Yeah.
from the emotional part of the brain. Another thing I wanted to say was that the black and white policy, you mentioned it great. So the thing with this policy is that like there's no thing such as black and there's no thing such as white in terms of
Mm-hmm.
wrong and right. There's no universal right, there's no universal wrong, and everything's gray. That's what the basically the fallacy says.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
like, so the majority of people, when they think something's right, so we tend to believe that that's the right thing, because majority of people like us agree with it, which might not always be the case. That's a good thing you pointed out, and I think Dhairya wants to continue something upon it.
Yeah, about the media houses, their purpose is to opinionate the people, aspire them as to a level that they have an opinion
Mm-hmm.
which can benefit the society in some ways. But as you see in various media houses, they add some tarka, that is spice, into their um, news for the
Yep.
TRP that you said. So basically, the thing is, as you mentioned about extremes, that the general public inclines towards the extremes. So basically, the public, with reference to the black and white fallacy, there are two sides of the coin. Basically, one thing is that
Mm-hmm.
one thing is right, but there is a very less set of public which is attracted to the moderate solutions. So basically, it is the purpose of the media houses
Mm-hmm.
to bring out those moderate solutions or opinions into the light.
Exactly.
Because not every time extreme solution can work, of course. Because every time we go to extreme right or extreme left, as in political terms, it
Mm-hmm.
may lead to conflicts and other things which are bad for
Exactly.
development of a country, or
Right,
may
right,
harm the society in the longer run.
right.
So that's the
Yeah.
purpose of the
Yeah,
media houses.
see, I remember now that we're talking about extremes. I
Mm-hmm.
remember this correspondence I had with Dr. Shashi Tharoor. It was a major event where I got the opportunity to ask a question to Dr. Shashi Tharoor, and the question was, why cannot the left, the right, the conservatives, the liberals work together? And he gave this very simple answer: is that when times change, the ideologies of the majority and minority of the people changes, right? So at a certain point
Mm-hmm.
of time, um, uh, when a certain law may be considered conservative, and that law needs to be passed, at that point of time, it is important for a conservative party to be in majority so that that important law can be passed, right? At the same time, when you need to pass a liberal law, at that point of time,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have a liberal government in power, or else that important liberal law will not be passed, right? So this is
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily agree with the statement that extremes are the problem here. Extreme as in the political ideologies. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
ideologies that support certain failed democracies or failed governments, such as the USSR. Of course, that's not a perfect government model to follow. But the importance of conservatives
Mm-hmm.
and liberals is that we need such ideologies in our society. And when I say conservatives or liberals, I definitely do not mean pseudo liberals or people as such who claim to be a
All right.
certain group, but they are basically doing it
They're not.
for gaining power, right?
Exactly. And one
So
more thing that you mentioned about the news and all. So the thing with news is, if we consider it as truth and false, the thing with truth is not spicy. The truth is not so attractive that people will directly, consume it. The thing with that is it's very complex and it requires a lot of research to, take the entire idea, the truthful idea, that is the actual, ideology that an entire step or whatever is, running under. So that to digest that, it requires a lot of research, which most of the people don't do because there are not a lot of smart people available here. All right, that's what I'm trying to say.
Right,
uh,
exactly.
uh, I just wanted to speak upon the like Aaron Singh's statement, what he said about the extremes. So there's a concept called the Overton window concept, and if we
Mm-hmm.
look at it from the perspective of a basic number line, 0, 1, 2, and -1, -2. So, for example, if leader says something at as a level 2 speech, and
Mm-hmm.
what that basically means is that a level 1 statement is more acceptable to the people if the level 2 statement was absurd. So this is how the extremes eventually change the mindsets and the mindset and the ideologies of the people. Like this way, the people slowly, because some high leader might condemn the the extreme statement and might give a statement which might be level one, and the level one statement will be more acceptable to the people.
Right. So,
Like there was the
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
go on.
continue.
Yeah, no, go on, please.
I wanted to say another thing about the people thinking. So there was a Greek philosopher called Plato, and
Mhm.
he mentioned about democracy being a failure if people don't think continuously again and again. So like the people cannot be conservative every time, that if the government is formed, this will have to remain for some time until and unless we have to think again. In a democracy, you constantly need to think for the new government, the benefits of the the government which is present, and you continuously need to keep thinking. And that's the reason why democracies in the world are giving rise to majoritarian leaders.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And also the funny thing about a perspective, right? A perspective on a right wing or a left wing is actually, in my opinion, it's just it's just stupid, because not every decision can be beneficial for a wing, right? Everything might have a different place on the number line, as just you
Yeah,
mentioned. And if we label someone as, let's say, just a right winger, we have a preconceived notion that he will just oppose all the ideas of the left wing, which is not true, right? Because everything is beautiful when there is a fusion happening. I want Aryan's take on this, actually, because we had a
Okay.
chat earlier about this.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want that ideas to come out.
Right. So, see, basically, my point is that, as I said, Dr. Shashi Tharoor and Dr. Shashi Tharoor agrees. So, I have a lot of support on this statement that for certain rules or certain laws to come out, there needs to be an extreme support to a certain extent, right? And I understand that no preconceived notion should be there about a certain political party or certain wing. But let's remember that when neither wings or neither sects are working, even though against each other, nothing will come up, because you know what, I I myself consider to be aligned with no political parties and a kind of a centrist, but I do realize that being a centrist, there cannot be no one particular solution to a problem that is not either liberal or conservative. It's always on one side of the number line, as we may discuss that you know some ideologies that need to be a part of a country, right? They need to come from
Hmm.
either conservative side or either the liberal side. So even if you try to reach a fusion or a centrist government, you will always have certain ways in which you need to make conservative changes or liberal changes, right? And that's
yeah,
basically
indeed.
what my point is. I mean, a centrist ideology is good, but when you actually
Hmm.
try to implement it, you reach nowhere, because in a centrist ideology, nobody's profiting, right? I mean,
All
yeah,
right.
that-
I kind of
exactly.
want you to elaborate on what, according to you, is a fusion of both the wings.
Well, fusion, I would say, is when you know if both the parties, or
Hmm.
parties as in general, both the parties come
Hmm.
together. I mean, the Lok Sabha, it's a fusion of various ideologies that come together to reach one particular solution, right? So that's what
Yep.
basically a fusion is. But what I'm talking about is a political party that has centrist ideologies. It simply cannot last long because it won't have enough people to support it, even though it should, because it is the best kind of way to, have unity in your country. But because people like to follow their own
Hmm.
extreme ideologies, such a party will not survive. I know Aman said that about Plato, where without people's knowledge or without people's complete education, a democracy
Hmm.
cannot succeed. And well, everywhere there's a certain flaw to democracy. In every democracy, take United
Yep.
States, take I don't know. If we are ready to consider
Any
China a democratic
democracy,
country,
right?
yeah, any democracy is in certain ways flawed, and a flawed democracy cannot work on
Hmm.
a centrist or a fusion ideology, because either way, you will reach a certain point where someone will demand for a particularly biased rule or a biased law. There, then the government will again go through several changes and reach either extreme liberal or extreme conservative. That.
All right. I might sort of like to disagree, like not completely, but like a parallel way. So what I think about fusion is different sort of like laws to be passed. There are different opinions that have to be taken seriously. That's what I'm trying to say. And we're
Right.
sort of misinterpreting what is a centrist, which is completely in the middle, which actually, as you say, it doesn't amount to anything, which is actually right. Because see, there's a reason why there is no centrist political party in India, which is actually in power. The thing is, people always move, as we said, move on to a completely extremist ideology. Either they are with religion or they're just without religion. All right. So this is just an example, right? And if there's something in the middle, people will think that this won't solve my issue and that won't
Right.
even
Exactly.
help my opponent.
Exactly.
So it's just like it's almost like nota, right? Like not completely,
Yeah.
but it's almost like nota. You're not solving anything, and you're also not destroying anything. But that means you're not even progressing. Right.
Exactly.
That's
Yes.
why
Exactly my point.
centrist ideologies won't exist that much. But the thing with fusion is, with different laws, we have to see, every law has to be leaning to some sort of a wing, right?
Yeah.
Not extreme. We are not considering extreme, because when it is extreme, as we said, it just ruins everything. All right. I want Darius' take on the difference between the fusion and the centrist.
Yes. In a centrist, it exists, of course, but the thing is, you'll pass such laws that basically affects no one, as no one follows that ideology as much as there are the extremists. So basically,
Right.
with the extremist ideologies, people will think that this party or this rule is doing nothing to us. Basically, it does not benefit us. So
Exactly.
basically, in a democracy, what happens? The majority of the people choose, of course. So basically, the majority will be inclined toward the extreme sides. So basically, a centrist party going to come into a power will be definitely hard for the party to happen. And about fusion can be different from, of course, centrist ideology, in the ways that in some cases you may lean conservative or liberal according to the need, which may satisfy the general public and does not has much conflicts. That is, in that way, a fusion can be different from a centrist ideology.
A democracy is basically the fusion of all kinds of ideologies, right? So when you live in a
Yes.
democracy, you're already living under a government that is in fusion. But the problem here is that the person
We
or
have a
the people
majority,
in
right? So
power,
the fusion
yeah,
won't happen.
yeah, the fusion is not happening. See, but the problem is that I'd rather say the issue is that people believe that even though, let's say, an apparent conservative government is in power,
Mhm.
people wants when an apparent, I'm saying, and not a
Mhm.
completely conservative government, right? When a apparent conservative government is in power, you see that people push to have conservative, at times extreme conservative laws to be passed or kept safe from abolishment, right? But
Yep.
the problem here is that liberals at times fall short of support because the power with the conservatives lies in majority, and that's where I think the whole problem roots from is the lack of opposition from any sorts of opposition that is actually effective, or let's say substantive in making the laws, right? I mean, let's face it, India at this point of time has no strong opposition, right?
Exactly.
Which is not wrong on the part of BJP, since BJP is definitely working under its own plan of action. But the problem here is that nobody is there to question to substantively question any kind of theory that to a certain
Mhm.
set may seem wrong or inadequate, right? And yeah, as Aman has said, that's where Plato's theory comes in. That any kind of democracy which does not have proper
Mhm.
education or proper knowledge with the people, it won't be a proper democracy and rather a flawed democracy, right? And
Yep.
again, going around this, we again reach the point where it comes to the people not being educated, or rather not having enough adequate sense, right, of understanding whether they are following whether they are following a party or a government rather than following their own country
Mm-hmm.
and country's interest, right? Like, yeah, please go
Yeah,
ahead.
and the funny thing about even voting in general or polling, as Plato said, if people are not educated, the polling won't, or even the democracy won't sustain. And the thing with polling is, majority of the people in every democracy, they just bluff their vote. They don't know what's happening actually in the country, because that requires a lot of research. And I said people won't research about it. And also think of media houses, right? Because a lot of people watch them thinking that they'll get all the news and all the knowledge of all the political parties from that. But the thing is, most of the media houses are inclined towards a certain wing or a certain political party. When a person watches that, he'll get influenced, and getting a wrong influence getting a wrong influence by fake news is very easy. There's WhatsApp available right now, and because of that, there's so many votes getting influenced. And yeah,
Yeah,
that's my point.
Yeah,
What do you think
yeah,
about fake news there? Like,
yeah. Fake news is basically like a way to opinionate the people. It is also known as yellow journalism in the general public. That basically the journalist manipulate facts such that it inclines towards one party or may not be true completely and does not show other side of it. So basically, that's what happens in media houses. That for their purpose of opinionation for people being inclined towards a particular ring or party, as you said, they do such things like yellow journalism and fake news as to influence. So basically, what this does is basically it influences the majority of the public to be
mhm.
reliant on such sources. So as you said, that people won't research about it. So basically, people are lazy due to the same thing, that they become reliant to such sources and they do not do research. So that's my view.
Right, moving on to Aman.
I believe that like the people like nowadays start enjoying the fake facts that are being shown. It's like now there was during the demonetization in India. I think there were a few news channels which were showing that like the 2000 or the 500 rupee notes actually have GPS trackers.
right.
Now
That
people
was
were
so stupid, right? I mean,
Yes,
But
that
why
people
is
would the
believed it.
government
manipulation of news.
spend? Yeah, why would the government spend so much money putting GPS trackers so that wherever the money goes, it
Mhm.
reaches, and where there is money for a long time, the government will have a complete control. I mean, the
Yeah,
government has
The
there
simple
are,
logic is,
yeah,
why
1.1
the
would
logic
billion
someone
is
people.
spend more
flawed.
money on making
Huh,
the money if you're spending more
right,
money
Yeah,
on
exactly.
a
That's
note
the
which is
logic.
not
That
worth
it's
that?
flawed.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
exactly.
So the
exactly
no
flawed.
one actually agreed with that
Hmm.
GPS tracker thing, but people actually were enjoying watching in the they were watching this as a entertainment purpose. Like, wow, I didn't know that news anchors could be like people as they had their opinion that we didn't know that news anchors could be so stupid. So that's why people if you don't believe in these types of news, stop watching them because they portray these facts just to gain TRPs.
Yes, they
It,
get
it,
promoted and they get the motivation to do it again and again like this. Basically,
Right,
they
right,
just
Exactly.
they just feed off that it is being circulated in the public.
yeah,
right.
so
and
And
and we can't deny the fact that people still believe. There were people who are believers of the fact that there's literally GPS trackers. I'm not kidding. There were people who were saying like there's a GPS tracker in the note. We know it. This is
right,
exactly what
yeah,
happens when there's fake news. Everybody can't be intelligent, right? There will be some people. See, for someone to be intelligent, there has to be someone who is stupid, because there's no comparison, right? If there is no one stupid. Yeah, right.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take this to a more relatable level. Let's talk about cringe pop. Are you guys aware of cringe pop? Basically, Dhinchak Puja, right? Dhinchak Puja gained her popularity on the
Mhm.
basis of bad and absolutely, you know, underproduced and trashy songs. The lyrics were not on beat and everything, and people
Yeah.
to make fun of
What are you
that
talking about? It
start.
was the best song
Yeah,
ever.
I know. I personally I love it too, but I'm just talking about experts here, right? So
Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah, from the experts, right? So she gained traction because she put herself under the fact that she knew she was cringe pop, right? And if we look at
Mhm.
that here, there are several people, and people like Dinchak Puja's songs. Some people did actually like them, right? So if we look at this with the same model, there are certain facts that media houses may portray, which are not necessarily facts or necessarily false, right? That's where a gray area comes in, as in they can report that, but only as an alleged statement. And that's where the problem comes in, where people look at it, and those who want to believe, they completely believe it, and those who do not believe and want to, chastise that media house, are still giving them the views or the TRP that
Yeah,
they
that's where
require.
the
Yeah,
that's where the alleged statement works.
exactly. Yeah, and talking about I think Yash brought up the idea of brought up the topic of fake news spreading through WhatsApp. Well, it's not the first time that we know that a certain ideology is being spread through social media. If you look at 2016's United States elections, presidential elections, there was a whole lawsuit, and a long case was written against Facebook for promoting uh, Donald Trump in certain places to a certain target audience, right? And
Personalized
and
ads, yeah,
yeah, exactly,
personalized.
exactly. And you see, we have reached a certain point where people um, look at people start looking at advertisements and start deciding their vote. I mean, not to
Mhm.
chastise the American audience, but there was a survey which found out that a certain percentage of Americans believed that chocolate milk came from brown cows. I mean, what is happening, guys? See,
So, the
Yeah,
funny
this
thing
kind
about
kind,
of
America
influence.
is
yeah,
most
see,
of the America gains their news from Facebook, and Facebook is the hub
yeah.
of ads. People have
Yes, there are
exploited this.
ads. It is basically a free platform. So basically, anyone can say anything, and any person can believe anything. Then, which
Yeah,
may
it's
be
a
false
platform
or true.
actually meant for news. It's not actually meant, but people try to consume news from Facebook
I
because
mean,
Yeah,
of the UI, I guess. Because the UI is such that there's like a headline and there's sort of a read more option, which is
yeah,
not the case with Instagram, because there are fake news spreading from Instagram as
yeah.
well, but Facebook is you know many degrees
Right.
higher than what
Facebook,
Instagram
and
is.
moreover, Facebook has a certain audience where it's, if you look at Facebook statistics, it will obviously be more people who are aged more than 30, 35, right? There's no
Mhm.
17 or 18-year-olds running around Facebook, surfing Facebook and gaining their traction and popularity there. It's all people who have reached a certain age and now have a certain prowess or let's say
Ideology,
hold in
and they're
society,
resistive
right?
to change.
Yeah, exactly. And using having such an audience which is so easily targetable, they you can clearly see that, even if not certainly proven, you can clearly see that there is a certain targeting or a certain personalized ads that in turn affect the audience's vote. And
yeah,
you see, social media is such that, again, going around everything, we understand that an aggressive nationalistic view can come from social media as well. And
yeah. See,
yeah,
the thing is that in mass media and social media, one thing is common. They will always target a particular sect of the society. And in
right.
terms of aggressive nationalism, also, they try to aspire it in a particular sect of society. So that's what is common between all these things. So
Exactly.
Right.
basically, we can see the progress or the initiation of such kind of nationalism through these aspects.
Exactly.
I'll just like to add a point. There
Hmm.
was a survey in America about the impact of clapping on the audience. So during the TV debates they have, so during that time they found out about approximate. I don't remember the exact values.
Hmm.
Approximately 80% of the audience was influenced when people clapped at a statement, and if the people didn't clap, that percentage dropped to about 30%.
Yeah. There's,
Right.
there's
I
there's
mean,
this a basic theory that this might be wrong, but what I feel is most of the humans go for validation. All right. And the
right.
thing with validation is people want to jump in a bandwagon. They want to be associated with a certain sect, and they don't want to. They hate FOMO. FOMO is the fear of
Yes,
missing
Fear
out.
of
They
missing out.
they
don't want
don't
to
Right.
want to
be in
miss
that
out.
situation. That's why people, they just think, yeah, if 10, 15 people are supporting this and clapping and expressing their views, why shouldn't I get associated with that? And here the
Exactly.
figures of, the influencers come in. And if influencers are, you know, a part of a campaign, it will just, it will soar inside, because people already look up to these influencers, and they'll
Yes.
just think like, I'll be in that bandwagon because, I trust that person.
Yes,
Yeah,
this all
that's my view.
starts from a small interest group and then it seems on to develop ahead. It starts
Mhm.
from a small interest group. Like if some people share the common interest, which may not be known to much greater public, but as you said, people have FOMO. So basically, they don't want to miss out. So basically, some people then go and join it due to the fear of missing out. So after that, it gets bigger and bigger, and more people keep joining on it. So basically, it starts from a small interest group and then it develops.
Right. I mean,
Yep.
we have a background in model United Nations. So let's pick up an example from that. When you make a good point and a few people clap, right, or bang on their desks, you like the validation, and
Mhm.
that makes you take steps that again give you more validation from that particular audience, right? And when you see another delegate saying rather emotional or not as substantive comments and still receiving the same
Mhm.
kind of validation, that reduces the value of validation that you are receiving, right? And you see, that's exactly how one would say that a certain sect of society will feel left outside from the majority will
Mhm.
either will either become the exact polar opposite or will become the part of the majority, right? And
Yep.
that's again where we see the problem of aggressive nationalism, that when you are not the part of the
Mhm.
majority, that means you are anti-nationalist, or that means you have something against the country as such and not
Yep.
just the government, right?
And what I feel is, I would like to link the concept of marketing, which is called undercutting, right? So what that
Yeah.
means is, if for example, A is getting blah 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 money for marketing. Let's say A has 100 numbers of audiences. This might be a bit complex, so guys, hear me out. So if A has 100 audience members, and he's charging 1,000 rupees for advertising, whereas B has 1,000 audiences, and he's still charging 1,000 rupees for them. Here, the entire market is, it's just misbalanced, right? Because no one knows what is the actual rate of marketing. And the same applies with opinions. If a good opinion gets applause of 100 people, and even a bad opinion gets applause of 100 people, people don't know where to clap and where to not clap. And here is where the whole opinion shifting happens and shit goes down.
Yeah, agreed on that.
Yeah.
Basically, one person goes ahead with appreciating a decision or an opinion by his own will, that is like his own opinion. So basically
Mhm.
some people followed it. So basically, as you said, the given the 100 and the 1,000 people clapping example. So basically 100 people might go with the good example, but the thing is that the people have such thinking that they must have this opinion on me, but they are harder to sway. Means like
Mhm.
we can't change your opinion so easily into the other opinion, or we can't grab them and put into the gray area, as we say. It is hard to do so due to this phenomenon.
I
I'd
want
like
Aman to, take over the Rwandan radio thing that happened. He explained me that
yeah,
few weeks
uh,
ago, and I think it's very relevant right now.
the Rwandan country in 1994 had a genocide, and the main cause of that genocide was just a radio channel. So the radio channel was so influential that there were two communities, had the Hutu and the Tutsi. So the Tutsi was the, I am not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but yeah, please, sorry for the
Hmm.
inconvenience. The Tutsis were the ones who, the ones who were the targets of the genocide, and the Hutus were the ones who did it. And the main influencer in this genocide was the Rwandan radio. So the Rwandan radio made such extreme comments and made people so angry that people, without looking at the logic, directly leapt into action. And this scenario is very relevant in today's world as well, where extreme statements may lead to communities or people clashing within themselves,
Hmm.
which might lead to a very dark consequence later.
Yep, agreed.
Right,
And what's
right,
your take, Karan, on this?
right. So see, the we again come to the fact that people do not question what is being told them, right? And they simply follow what is being told to them in a certain way that they consider everything to be correct. Now, let's talk about a matter closer to home, Sri Lanka, right? Sri Lanka, the Sinhalese community was
Yes.
told by the Sinhalese majoritarian leaders that they must follow their own Sinhalese culture, and that
Yes,
should be
they
their
must enforce their language across the country,
right.
and they must suppress
Exactly,
out the Tamil minority, basically.
exactly. Now, if you look from the point of view of Sinhalese majoritarian leader, one might think, and I'm
Hmm.
being completely biased when I say this as a character of Sinhalese leader, that I am doing good for the people of the original people, the indigenous people of my country, right? Whereas I may consider the people, the Tamilians, to be outsiders, right? But then
Hmm.
again, let's look at it from a world view, right? We any person in any country being a citizen should not feel left out of that particular country, right? And then when we see actions such as um, the extremists that come up from that particular area. So the Tamilians, after a certain point of time, they turned rebels and they started using extremist and violent acts in order to protest it, or rather simply show their signs of disagreement. And
Hmm.
this can be seen in so many places where
Yep.
yeah, exactly. When let's take the point of Afghanistan, right? Afghanistan, there's
Hmm.
a communist government. People don't agree. Rebels are created, right? So that's the whole point. But the problem here is, as we know, that a certain
Hmm.
ideology is sent out, and that ideology, without being questioned, is consumed by the people and put into life, is being proliferated simply on the basis of understanding of interpretation, an open interpretation of that ideology, right? So okay, yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying is that um, we need more interpretate. We need more clear interpretations of what the government talks about, right? I mean, I personally know Aman and Dhairya to be quite open in criticizing certain actions that have been taken by the government of India, right? And I do not hold that against them because they're criticizing the government, which is their right as a citizen of this country,
Yes,
and they have the
basically,
right
a
to
country
decide.
works on the same thing, on the same basis. Some might
Exactly,
support, some might criticize. So
right,
basically, that's how
exactly.
we implement a better government.
Right. Where anti-patriotism comes in is where a person, let's say, says something to the army, right? I mean, the person who is living at his own house, living in complete luxury, says the army is doing so and so wrong. Well, that person has no right to say so. Not coming from that background and talking stuff that
Hmm.
they do not have complete and utter knowledge about. So that's where anti-patriotism, non-patriotism comes in, and such people, I believe, definitely should be disciplined and punished in the correct ways. But there are some people who are legitimately trying to be create an opposition or
Hmm.
create a certain notion that what they
Yep.
believe is correct. And a political ideology is always in someone's eyes correct and someone's eyes wrong, as the gray area, right? Everything,
Exactly.
every truth is subjective, right? So what my truth is may not be the truth for Dharya or Aman. So that's exactly what my point is that when these aggressive nationalists become
Hmm.
so powerful that their definition of patriotism becomes the criteria of defining
Yep.
what a patriot or what a citizen of a country should be. That's where the problem comes in, right? I mean, I don't want to
Hmm.
point fingers and I don't want to talk about controversial stuff, but we know
Yep.
what Nazis did, right? They create they
Yes.
chose to educate the young pope, right? The young pope,
Hmm.
which was a youth organization, and it was the most easily influenced part of the society, which grew to be a rather more
Yep.
nationalistic, aggressively nationalistic point of view. And if you are to be aware of some
Hmm.
dystopian novels, I have read one of them, which is The Man in the High Castle. It depicts of how World War II would have what the world would have been if World War II ended in the Nazis, the Axis powers' favor,
Hmm.
right? So it basically shows that the society becomes extremely conservative, right? There, um, as we talked about, there is
Yep.
aggressive nationalism, where aggressive and completely biased nationalism, we should say, and patriotism is defined by how well you abide by the Nazi ideologies or the Japanese
One
ideologies.
more thing here to be
Right?
taken into note is the idea or the concept of accountability. As you said about the thing where people comment on the army stuff without knowing stuff, the thing with free speech where it exists is there should be a concept of accountability. What you say, you must be accountable for. Even if it's on social media or something, you need to be accountable for. Or there are some cases where people are intoxicated by some substances, and that time they tweet something, yet they are held accountable, which is they should be accountable and they have to give a public apology. But here in the case where people just give weird stuff, let's say politicians, they just give out weird statements, they should be held accountable for which they are not in most of the cases. Because of that, the entire ideology changes and shit goes down. So I really wanted to ask, what's your take on free speech and accountability?
Yeah,
Let's
about
start with there.
yes, about free speech. Yes, you can opinionate upon something, but sure, you are the person responsible for it, as you are the person speaking about it. So that's where accountability comes in. As you gave the example of army people being criticized without any accountability, and the persons are not being held for it. So basically, what happens is that these people are not held accountable by the authorities. And in the case of aggressive nationalism, due to the majority or the movement that is being taking place, the majority politicians and leaders can say whatever they want and not be held accountable. So that's the link that it forms with aggressive nationalism. So basically, any person who is in the minority will be accountable for whatever he or she may criticize. But for the majority, it may not be the same. So that's where accountability comes in
Right,
with
right.
the with
Yep.
reference to right to speech.
Right.
Let's take Aman's opinion on this. Aman, what's your take?
The accountability, I wanted to say this, but I don't think there will be a law about this. I think that the manifesto of political parties must be something that is legally binding. So they should do what they promised in their manifesto, because most of the times parties get away with it, and they don't usually do fulfill their promises that they had.
I
And
mean,
I
let's
believe that I want this to happen, like this become the manifesto of political parties becomes legally binding, but I don't think that will ever
I
happen.
think it is
well,
because
yeah,
I guess the
yeah.
campaigning should be legally, the campaigning should have a legal, whatever that's called.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot the word what
There,
he said.
I think there is, there's a code of conduct, and if there's a manifesto, and the manifesto is obviously a public record, and people are aware of what the manifesto says, and if a certain political party does not, proliferate what they have put down in their manifesto, obviously they will have their repercussions, where in the next elections they won't come in the power, right? Despite how many threats they send to the people. Of course, people will choose their own, choose the leaders and the government that they know is profitable or rather beneficial for them. And talking about free speech and talking about accountability, well, I completely believe that free speech is a necessity to democracy, right? But free speech in
Mhm.
certain ways. We have sedition laws saying that if your speech instigates violence or is against the integrity of your nation, it's definitely comes under sedition, and it should. It is
Yes.
a requirement.
There should be
Basically,
But
proper implementation of these laws. Like they
See,
are
see,
not.
we're forgetting the
there is
fact that
yeah.
law is vague.
No,
Law
see,
is completely vague, right?
well,
And see, if we put more restriction on the speech of the campaigns or whatever, there will be an opposition coming up which will say you're obstructing the freedom of speech, which
well,
actually has no defense. All right, there's
you
actually no
know,
defense to that argument. That's why this
well,
whole
actually, there is,
campaigning stuff, it's very hard to stop. It's Yes, there is, but it's very
yeah,
difficult to implement it, as Aman said.
well, as a certain believer, I
Hmm.
believe that the freedom of speech should never is never in any sense completely independent, completely free, right? Because you can't do freedom, you can't say stuff, a certain stuff, without being chastised for it or publicly defamed for it, right?
yes, we
But
are governed by something. Even if we say something, we are still governed by it. So
yeah,
basically,
you
it's
are
Yep.
not
governed.
entirely free.
Yeah, and if you choose to, if everybody has freedom of speech, which is completely unregulated, I can assure you that the world will stop existing in 5 years, because a certain
Exactly.
faction will be offended by another faction. They will enter. They will enter. Extremist conflicts. Then violence will happen, and it will reach a
Hmm.
national level. When it reaches national level, then NATO will come in, and with NATO coming in, there will obviously be the Russian bloc coming in, and again the whole world war scenario will be created. And as we know,
Exactly. Like
world war
there's no
is
defined line. There's no defined
right.
line where to cross and where
Exactly.
not to
I
cross.
mean,
And
yeah,
see,
exactly.
offense
Yeah,
is a completely subjective concept. If we take into consideration whatever happens between the comedic circle, like in the comic circle, when someone cracks a joke and people are offended, there's a certain section who is actually not even offended. They don't even care about that joke because they think it's not offensive. But there is another section which is it is just outraged because of the joke, which
right. And
because of that, the subjectivity of the offense leads to the laws being vague, and that's why there can be various
right,
scenarios like
well,
the politician giving
but
some
there
vague
are
statement,
certain
because of that people changing opinions.
right. And basically, let's face it, most political campaigns are based on statements that are almost completely vague, right? And even though
Yep.
you may choose to promise that you will bring a certain change, after a certain point of time in coming in power and realizing you cannot make that change, you will come out again and say that it does not have a complete does not have complete implementational power or complete implementational resource as a whole country. And that's again where we come to the point that the people will again have to wait for another 4 to 5 years so that they can change their government, and they can choose the conservative party or the political party. And then we also narrow it down to the fact that a certain ideology of aggressive and biased nationalist will choose to still remain with that government because they they have their own bias, right? I mean, seriously, this is all that we can confirm
Hmm.
when talking about free speech and accountability, right?
Yep. All right, so we're almost at the end, because I guess how long are we speaking for? Is it 1 hour already?
Yes, 1 hour
Yeah,
almost.
it's
Well, it does not seem like long because it's such an extensive topic to talk upon.
It's almost like
yeah.
the thing I enjoy about podcasts is it's almost like a conversation you're having. Right, so we almost are at the end, so we must conclude because we are running short of time. So yeah, Aman, would you like to conclude
I
today's
wanted to,
discussion?
from my point of view, I would like to say that like the aggressive nationalism and the anti-national schemes are more and more being used for, like they are being used for the wrong purposes. they are being used for distracting people from some actual problems that are being like faced by the country. So people will tag someone anti-national and the whole nation will be talking about that, and there will be something else happening somewhere which the government completely wants to cloud. So
Yep.
there's that's one of the thing I think that aggressive nationalism and anti-nationalism is doing right now. It's more generally being associated with that. Other than that, we in the podcast discuss about a lot of things about the fake news and how this gives a whole new dimension to the aggressive nationalism, about past examples of Rwanda and Sri Lanka, and how aggressive nationalism and fake news eventually led to disasters. I would like to hear others add their views on this.
Yeah,
Great
about
Well,
one.
this.
you actually summed it up well. It's almost,
Yeah, we have
it's almost.
summed it up in
Mhm.
our 1 hour conversation and how it is so related to the everyday things that we may not think affect us uh, on a level that may affect the society, but there are some things which affect. We have talked upon it.
Yeah, just I guess one point to add, which is just be skeptical. That's just one point I would like to add. What about Aryan?
Right. So basically, we talked a lot of things, right? We talked about, we talked about Greek philosophy. We talked about how media houses are affecting the changing of ideologies. We talked about how all of this comes in from the roots that people are not researching enough about their leaders,
Hmm.
about the news that they see, and basically, if we try to conclude it in one hour long conversation, well, it's quite frankly quite less of what we've discussed, right? We talked about extremist
Hmm.
ideologies, as in either conservative or liberal, and the requirement of both kinds of ideologies, right? And we talked about how centrist ideologies may not prove fruitful, uh, not for the people, not for the people who are trying to spread the centrist ideologies. And
Hmm.
all in all, we see that in today's world, if you are not part of a group, you are, let's say, a rebel or a non-conformist. You are definitely bound to either be integrated into the society forcefully or completely shut out of it. And let's just say that we plan to change that in our ways that
Yep.
we can, right? And I
All
guess
right.
that's it from the Gaia Project's founding members. This has been the first podcast of the Gaia Project, and well, we thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Until the next podcast. Peace out.